Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Evolving Practice Podcast. I'm Dr. Bill Moss with my co host.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Carey.
And today on the Evolving Practice Podcast, we're going to navigate the ins and outs of avoiding practitioner burnout, which, we were reflecting. We've been both in practice and doing healing work for over a decade now. I think I'm getting close to 13 years. You're about the same. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, like 13, 14.
Yeah. And I'm never been burned out. No, not true at all. In fact, when we were kind of discussing topics, and this is one that, gosh, people that listen to this, there's
Yeah.
different stages of burnout that can
Yeah.
occur along the way, and we're going to talk about how to avoid it, what it is, different ways we've gotten ourselves out of it, and how to kind of continue progress without burnout.
Yeah, this is such an important topic because being a healer, it's not an easy profession.
Mm-mm.
Whatever capacity somebody is, whether they're working as a psychotherapist or a dentist or a chiropractor or an energy healer, these different things. You're dealing with people, which is amazing and challenging. And then also there's just for many people listening, probably running a business, which is its own set of challenges. So yeah, there's a lot of balls you're constantly juggling in the air, and it can get a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, and I mean we've discussed like the consequences and the excitement of working with people, but over time, there can just be a rhythm to the practice that, if not made fresh, you definitely can be times of burnout. And I think one of the hardest things about burnout is sometimes it takes you longer to recognize what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think it's something else or your health's affected, but sometimes it's just the fact that, like, you are really hitting a stage where you are burning out. So what is a time, just quantify this. What's a time like what was the time when you were most burnt out in practice, would you say?
I think it was really like kind of the first year or
Mm,
two. And I ended up taking over a practice, and I had never had the experience of running the business before. And there was just a lot of scarcity thinking
mm,
that if I wasn't open like every day and on the weekends, that we
mm,
wouldn't like patients wouldn't find us. So
mm.
there was a lot of stress and just feeling like I need to do everything. It's also at the beginning of the business, you kind of do need to do that sometimes. So
Mhm.
there was also a necessity of the business being like a new doctor in town, that I really had to get out there and go to a lot of different events. And
Yeah.
my nature is a much more introverted by nature. So I didn't understand that about myself as well back then. But when you're in a profession where there's so much like interpersonal work associated with it,
Mhm.
that I just didn't have really my recharge time, because
Mm.
I was working with clients or I'm doing events and all these other pieces, and I didn't have that time to recharge myself. And I
Mm.
also I was the stress of the brand new thing, and then also not having the experience of having gone through these cycles of practice and work before.
Yeah.
How about
Yeah.
you? What comes to mind for
Uh,
you?
Man, I feel like my first 5, well, gosh,
Mm.
I feel like there's levels of every year that are kind of
Yeah.
hard, and but it's like, how long does the burnout last? I feel like within a couple years ago, I was really hitting burnout a
Yeah.
little bit, and I had an associate doctor for 4 years, and I think in some ways, like, the burnout of managing so many people. I
Yeah.
had the most employees at one point in time, and trying to work within all the different personalities. And I think that got a little bit challenging. That
Yeah.
I just, because if you're not willing to manage that, it can be really kind of take over. So I think I was left a little burned out after that when I went back to practicing by myself for, then maybe the next year or so. It was hard because you kind of had to like reinvent. Um, but I didn't have this energy to kind of reinvent. And
Yeah.
I tried a lot of different like marketing strategies, and I just felt like they kind of hit a dead end. So I feel
Yeah.
like in the last year and a half, I kind of came out of that. But I think there were, maybe a 2 year stretch where I felt like I was banging my head against the wall a little bit more often than not. Like, when you keep trying to make some small changes that aren't really resulting in bigger change, I think I was
Yeah.
just feeling an overall stuckness within the way I was practicing that has been revitalized over the last, couple years, I can say. But yeah, it can be really tough because there are cycles in practice, right? So
Yeah.
there's times to push and there's times to not. And I don't think you know that early on, kind of like you said. I mean, I remember times in my first year where I was like, "Oh, I'm doing something on every weekend."
Yeah. Yeah.
To push the cart forward. And the tide can change on you really quickly, where you're like doing really, really well, and then you have a bad week. But that week is, one of 24 weeks because you've only been open for like almost half a year, right?
Yeah.
But like 1 week now is like whatever. It's not as big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but it matters more when you're first open. So I think the swings can be really kind of quick and intense in the first year.
Yeah.
And also, I kind of set myself up that first year with like, I'm going to do everything I can to kind of continue to grow. And I don't know if you've ever learned this lesson, but I remember within my first year of practice, I had like 3 vacations, like weekend getaways in 1 month. And that was my record month.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it's so
Like,
it's so funny how that happens.
yeah, it was like September of 2015, my first year of my practice being open. And I remember I was like going to learn one weekend, I was going to have fun another weekend, and I was doing something else. And I
Yeah.
remember being like, wow, that's like 3 weekends away. And like that month was my first like big month. I had a big jump and I was like, oh my gosh, look. I went away and it got better. And then I started to realize like there is somewhat of a trend. the
Yeah.
more I the more I take off and get my mind out of practice, the more it would grow. So,
It's such an important understanding, I think, and it's something that BJ Palmer, who is the developer of chiropractic, one of the things that he's really famous for is he traveled the world many times.
mm,
And we're talking about like 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, and he went around the world at least 3 times. I think more than that though.
mm,
And it was like one of his teachings was that when you're feeling stuck, you need to get out,
mm,
get out of where you are to a totally different place. And it was
mhm,
something that I didn't really listen to, even though I was reading the books. I wasn't doing that enough.
mhm,
But then, as when I got exposed to the mystery school work, it kind of required travel because there might be a class I really wanted to take, but it was in London, and I'd never
mm,
been to Europe or never really, left across the pond in that way. So it started forcing me to get outside my comfort zone. And
mhm,
I had those fears of, oh, what happens if I take time off from the practice? And
mhm.
then it just ended up working out,
Yeah.
and then the time kind of stretched. Like, okay, what if I'm gone for 2 weeks? I'd never done anything like that before. I thought I could only be gone for 1 week. And then all of a sudden, sometimes it was 2 weeks I had to be gone. And I started finding out these different processes and like creating the support structures I need, both with
Mhm,
staff and like a coverage doctor and getting everything together. And
mhm,
ultimately, I think what's helped me with breaking through burnout the most is I have to have these things I look forward to.
mhm.
So, and it can't be just work. It needs to be like I like to have a couple different things that I'm really excited about that are like
Yeah.
in the future, and then
Yeah.
there's an enthusiasm that I get from that, like a passion
Mhm,
for life that then kind of like comes into the work.
mm. Yeah. No, I totally, even when and I think in those 2 years, I spent the 2 years. I don't wanna say I was burned out for 2 years, but I
Yeah,
felt like there was a lot of, like, overcoming within that period of time. I remember just constantly trying to spend time figuring out how to push through and how to.
yeah,
And so I, even when I was, like, not in the practice, I was like working to grow stuff.
yeah,
My time was built a community, building the center community, the mystery school community in the area, building the practice and handling marketing and building social media. And I just remember just being like, I have way too many meetings. like on my
Yeah.
downtime. I have
Yeah.
way too many like organizational decisions, and it's like none of it feels fun anymore. It's like I'm just managing all these things.
Yeah.
Um, and you don't want to like vacation to be your runaway, right?
Yeah.
Because I really do enjoy that time. And what I have found is, that I was kind of figuring out my formula early in practice. That first month gave me a lot of insight. That first month, meaning like when I took all that time off and saw the
Yeah.
success. And I've been connecting with that more and more where, I love when we do when we go camping, like we've done a seasonal campsite. We've traveled with camping, but just the mere fact of when we would actually get there, I
Yeah.
automatically start to get that creativity back, and I
Yeah.
start to like dream and wonder and create. And I realize like if I don't get in that state frequently, I'm actually burnt. I'm not living in a state of growth. So I need to go away to allow myself to get into that. Like I want to create, I want to grow,
Yeah.
um, energy, and it's a feeling for me. And um, for a while, I was like the forced creativity where um, when we give ourselves that space, it just like starts to occur very naturally. And that's one of the signs when I am burned out is I don't experience that. That's what I've come to know. I don't experience that creativity on a really
Right.
frequent basis.
That's a really, really good understanding. I'm like, if you're not in the healing profession, it can be kind of hard to understand how much actually goes into it
Mm,
because it's like we have, like, you might just see the office hours. One thing
yeah.
I'm actually really excited about is our office where we're switching gears to Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday for chiropractic, like basically all day Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But it's going to free up Tuesday afternoons for me. And but like oftentimes it's where going to sleep and you might have different clients on your mind when you're going to sleep or
Mhm,
different,
mhm,
different cases, different situations or things that you need to do with a business or decisions to make. And there's just so many things to manage all the time. And there's
mm,
just like running a business is way different than I imagined it would be. Yeah, there's so many days that something big comes up that you have to address immediately that wasn't even on the docket of something that you imagined you had to do that day.
mhm, mhm.
So it's like there's this just these wheels turning all the time sometimes. And for me too, like you have camping, like sometimes I like to do like just like reading. I love to read, so reading is a
Mhm,
great just disconnect for me.
mhm.
Being outside really helps me. Like I think it's really
Yeah,
helpful to get out of your physical locations sometimes
yeah,
because it's like our thoughts and our energy permeates the space around us, and we can just
yeah.
get in this cloud of how we've been. So I think that there's a really special trait of getting outside, like when you're feeling
Mhm.
stuck, and
Yeah.
just
Well,
moving your body and energy.
it's funny because when you say you're like, "Oh, you have camping." Well, it's like the 2 main things I do when we go camping are, like,
Yeah,
we get outside and I read.
yeah,
Like, a
yeah.
lot. Those are 2, and I go through these phases where, like, I really I think that's probably another sign when I am burned out is I don't wanna read.
Oh,
Like,
interesting.
now that we're
Yeah,
actually saying it, I think because I'm like, there's times in my life just love, like I'm in one right now. I just love reading. I
yeah,
like don't really want to watch TV. I pick up a book every single night. I read 10 to 20 pages probably. Like I'm really into
yeah,
reading right now. And I
yeah,
also feel very like motivated about practice and healing
yeah,
work. And um I think that's a sign like where I'm just if I'm overstimulated, I don't want to read. I don't want to take away because I think I need to control stuff so much instead
yeah.
of giving my mind a break and just allowing it to explore the book, you know?
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things, and I especially like to read, like, for me, like, epic fantasy novels are kind of my, favorite, like, break.
Mhm,
So it's something, fiction, I typically
mm,
don't read, like, nonfiction, like, 'cause for a while I would read, but it would be just business books, it'd be business books or
yeah,
marketing books or
yeah,
all these different pieces. but it's just you end up getting the gears just continually turning on like on the running the
Mhm.
business,
Yeah.
and like I need something totally different to refresh.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I was kinda similar. I tend to be drawn toward, um, nonfiction books in the sense of, like,
Yeah,
growth and business and that sort of thing. But when you read too many, you have too many. I personally, this is me speaking on my own, is I'll have too many ideas, and I
yeah,
don't need that many. I need to I've actually learned, like, there's a small group of things that you need to do well in business. And
yeah,
we haven't really talked about the business of healthcare. Maybe that's a good
yeah,
episode to explore. But there's not you don't need to we don't need to do as much. There's these pockets of
correct.
understanding that constantly get tweaked once you have a system,
Yeah,
and I think one of the things I got to the conclusion, especially last year, hitting 10 years in this practice, I was like, I don't want my next 10 years to be the same. And part of that same is I don't want to experience burnout. I want to
yeah,
experience this creative joy. And there's a formula to that for me. And I think we've already started to explore the reading, the grounded nature, the having some activities that I do that are just completely for fun and don't
yeah,
really have a purpose,
yeah,
and that's cool too. Like, I think people need some things that are really just a pure joy, and they're not escaping. They just
yeah,
have this recognition that they really just enjoy it. They get whisked away. Um, and I'm exploring that more and more. The other week, I'll give you an
mm,
example. Like, um, I grew up, my family's from Pittsburgh, so I enjoy the Pittsburgh Steelers. When they lose, it doesn't last at all, not 1 minute after. I'm like, but I enjoy it. I go to a
yeah,
game or two a year. And I remember during the whole, like, 2020, the NFL got really political and all this. And I was like,
yeah,
I'm not gonna watch this. I don't really wanna pay attention. And then I was like, in saying that, I was like, you know what? It's kind of fun for me, and it doesn't do
yeah,
anything beyond that, and it's really joyful. And just 2 weekends ago, my wife was like, I was looking at playoff tickets in Baltimore and stuff, and she's like, I was like, "Yeah, not too much. Maybe I'll go." And she goes, "Yeah." I was like, "I think I wanna take the nephews." My sister's kids are, like, Ravens and Steelers fans, and she's like, "You should just let's go. Just take them." And I was like, "Alright." And I was like, I called my sister. I was like, "Do you think
yeah,
they'd be into this?" And she's like, "Yeah, I think they would." So I was like, "You guys wanna go?" So I took them. We went down to Baltimore. We stayed in a hotel. My Ava and Lauren came along, and, like, Ava was like, "There's a pool. I'm gonna have so much fun." And this, like, went from Thursday morning to this was Saturday. It was totally,
yeah,
like, spontaneous. And before, when I was, like, so worried about growing things, I would have thought about this too much, and we did it. And I've just had so much fun with my
yeah,
nephews, and they got this memory. And, like, it was just this pure joy thing that was just related to a value of mine, which is family. Um, and I loved kind of creating that memory together, and it totally recharged me because it was really spontaneous. And I know when I put these aspects in my life that aren't fully, like, obviously related to, like, my purpose and my mission, right?
yeah.
They're so helpful in maintaining a life that's not being burned out.
Yeah, what a beautiful share. I remember when I was getting started in practice, or not getting started, like this was a few years in. So I had was burned out at that time, and I was going to a lot of seminars, and I was looking at different chiropractors who I admired, like mentors, and
Yeah.
the ones who there were a lot of chiropractors who I really admired, and they seemed to like they were happy. They
Hmm.
had good marriages. They were successful. They really enjoyed their work, and a lot of them had these like 4-day a week schedules.
Yeah.
And so that was something that before I worked 6 days a week. And then
Mm.
I
Wow.
just yeah, like, I mean, we do, like, Saturday mornings and, like, it wasn't always a full, like, 6 days, but there wasn't the time for your mind to rest. And one
Yeah.
of the things that they had is they had these, like, 3 consecutive days off, which, just allowed their mind to kind of reset after the week. And I just really noticed that pattern with my mentors, like, the ones who had that, they just seemed to be
Mhm.
much more thriving and happier. And for people who had been doing it for decades, somebody who could do
Mm,
it for 30 years or 40 years and still be loving their working career. It
yeah.
was like I really noticed that they had like some good recharge time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of set my schedule up from that. I like took the advice of some of the mentors when I opened my practice, and I pretty much stick to about a 4-day schedule. Now,
Yeah.
I work a couple Fridays, but it's only like 9 to 11. But then my Monday's kind of easy. Like we really record podcasts on Mondays, but I only see
Yeah.
clients 8:30 to like 1, and then do some admin stuff and spend time with my daughter on Monday.
Mm.
Um, and that runs pretty good. But I even like, so I kind of like the 4 days only,
Yeah.
especially in the chiropractic work. Cause I don't know how you do this, but um it's it's harder. I like to do the healing work on days I'm not doing chiropractic work, preferably. I think it flows better when it's I'm not like going back and forth, I guess you could
Mm.
say. Sometimes it happens, but I think I prefer to have them a little bit of separation with each one of those. Yep.
Yeah, there's like a unique way of thinking or way of being that we are in the different things.
Hmm.
So, like as an energy healer, I am perceiving the world around me and differently than I am when I do chiropractic.
Yep.
Like when I'm doing chiropractic, I'm just in a different mode of analysis. With
Hmm.
energy healing, there's like just very different ways. My brain waves are probably going at completely different states.
100%.
So it's just like it's much more sensitive to the energy around me. It's typically a lot more slower paced with things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and it's really hard to go back and forth between the
Hmm.
two things quickly. Like even my mornings will be different when I'm doing the energy healing.
Hmm.
Like it's just like I have a different routine to kind of get into that state. Versus chiropractic, like my the days I get most done are the days that I have a full chiropractic day because
Yep.
I'm just in this mode of like go and my brain's working super fast and I'm making
Hmm.
tons of decisions and
Yep.
but it's really hard to go back and forth for me.
Yeah. No, I feel that too. So, and that's a balance, right? And we know people
Yeah.
who kind of do multiple. We had Aaron Bannock, who's a vet and
Yeah.
oncology vet, and also spiritual guide and energy healer. And um, you're all the healing work requires an essence of us, but the
Yeah.
way it's done is slightly different across the board. And I feel like that's taken some time to really understand and do. And this year, one of my goals, um, I didn't really say this to you, is to create, I think I want to teach less often, but
Yeah.
bigger groups, and do more work to build those opportunities, because the amount of energy to teach classes, on the regular,
Yeah.
um, is kind of the same, right? Like a
Yeah.
small group and a big group, to some degree, it's sometimes it's more energy for small groups, right? We've
Yeah.
learned that with some of
Absolutely.
the classes. So, and I have one daughter, and we have another one on the way. So it's like I really want to maximize when I do things. And
Yeah.
that's it. I think because I'm feeling a new reinventing of myself. And I think that's what needs to occur when people feel burned out. Like you're not going to continue to get places when you're doing the same thing, and expecting the same results. Like something needs to change. Vacation, new activity, even movement of the body.
Yeah.
That's one thing for me. Also, if I'm not moving my physical body, usually I'm not. Yeah, that's that catch 22 that people
Yeah.
experience, like, right? "Oh, I don't have the energy to move," but you would have the energy to
Did it. Yeah.
if you would just do it. And I've actually experienced some of that recently too, where I, like, got out of working out and I'm like, "Oh, I don't have the energy to work out." And then as soon as you start doing it, you're like, "Oh, that's where that was."
Yeah.
So,
What a good piece of awareness though.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah. One thing that also helps me is I'll have I really need just at least like it's taken me 10 years to learn this, maybe more, but I need at least a day of like a do nothing day. I try to
Yeah.
do it like probably every 10 ideally every week. but
Mhm.
it's hard for me if I don't have it within like a 10-day period. And oftentimes it's not like I'm hanging out and being social because I'm more introverted by nature.
Yeah.
It's like I just need a day to myself where it's like I get to sleep in and just
Mhm.
like putter around the house and do these little things where there's just not a demand to perform on my energy, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but like if I don't have that, that can lead to me getting sick. It can lead to
Yeah.
it just ends up being really difficult for me.
Yeah. Yeah, doing nothing accomplishes a lot. And
Yeah.
I actually think it's the I think that's the most important part of burnout is like you have to get comfortable, especially when you're a high producing productive person.
Yeah.
Also a person that likes to maybe do physical activity and take care of themselves. And if you have lots of routines to manage your energy, sometimes it's really like the most helpful thing is to kind of break completely from that mold and do something
Yeah.
very different. And I definitely feel like I become most alive when I get out of that consistent, um, predictable rhythm. Even just getting out of the house, like
Yeah.
my daughter was like, I just want to go. Well, this is how her and my wife ended up coming with me. Lauren's like, you got to take them. It's going to be a trip. They'll have so much fun. And I was like, okay. And then Ava sits there at the breakfast table and she's like, but I'm really going to miss daddy. I don't want him to go. And she was like getting like sad and I was like, because they were going away a couple days later to go visit Lauren's brother. And Lauren's
Okay.
like, well, we'll just get a hotel that has a pool and like we'll do
Yeah.
girls night. And then it turned into this whole thing. And she was like, we're going to Baltimore and Baltimore's gonna be amazing. And we're gonna be in this hotel. And she just like the whole I mean, we can go to a hotel in like Reading, 15
Yeah.
minutes from where I live, and like it can turn into this big adventure. And like that's the whole point is
Yeah.
um we just need to do that more often. And that's kind of what we walked away saying was like it doesn't matter if it's within 30 minutes from our home. Like when you get out of your home, and this is what I love about camping, love it, is you're not doing laundry and chores when you go camping. Like, well, even
Yeah.
though we have a glamping travel trailer and whatnot, we're not doing chores when we go there. We're like just doing nothing. And
Yeah.
it's one of the easiest hacks for us to like you get out there, you're reading, you're cooking food, a meal is an activity,
Yeah.
and you slow down, you're in nature, you sleep so much better because you're closer to the elements. And it's just such a great way for me. So I kind of fought the idea of getting a travel trailer and stuff at first, Lauren, but then it's like one of the best decisions we made because it's
Yeah.
forced us out of that regular routine of the week. And it makes me excited to go back and take care of people.
Yeah. And the irony is that when if you can disconnect your brain a bit, that's
Mhm.
like when those creative solutions come in and the idea just like snaps through.
Yeah.
I was listening to an interview with Elon Musk, and love him or hate him, he's a very successful and smart man. So
Mhm.
it's like this guy's running many different businesses that are very complex, and he's also like the one of the top players in the world at Diablo 4, which is just really really interesting because that's just such an intense thing.
Hmm.
And he was talking in this interview about how for him, he plays these video games on like expert, the most extreme difficulty, because for him that actually helps his mind calm down. It's like it
Interesting.
requires just so much focus that he's not thinking about those other things.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, like there is just something to that of just like having to be totally disconnected from these thoughts that can just persist in the background for us.
Yeah.
It's just like you just need something to totally take your engagement, whatever it is, whether it's cooking or dancing or reading or pick your
Yeah.
flavor, but it needs to be strong enough of a pull to just disconnect you from whatever it is that you're
Mm.
obsessing or worrying about.
It's like a fun activity that I felt like there was so much learning in. And I feel like
Yeah,
this is the initiate, right? Like the difference between like initiation gives you like this deeper breadth and depth and outlook of whatever you're doing. So at the
right.
holidays this year, my family growing up, one of our traditions around the holidays, where my parents would always have like the same people over for New Year's Eve, like when we were growing up as kids. And I remember kind of being around a lot with them because once my sister's a little older than me and she was always invited to things. And, by the time we hit middle school or she hit middle school, I was still elementary. So I'd like hang out with my parents on New Year's Eve
Yeah.
with my parents' friends, and they would do puzzles. They would get like a puzzle for New Year's Day Eve, and my parents would have it out and they'd start working on it, and then everybody would start working on it, and then like it would stay out afterwards because most of the time people didn't finish it, and they'd work on it. And somehow Lauren and I brought that concept up this year, and Lauren bought my mom likes to do puzzles.
Yeah.
She bought her this 1,000-piece like Christmas wintry theme puzzle, and it was sitting. And Lauren's like, "Why don't let's do a puzzle this year? Like, let's do it." So we got it out, and we're working on it. And I think it took us 10 days in the new year to finish this 1,000-piece puzzle. It was really quite tough, but excuse me, we loved like you can't think
Yeah.
about a lot of other
Yeah.
things, and
Yeah.
and you start to see detail and color and shapes, and you just kind of forget where you are, and you're like, no, I don't. At first it's hard, you're
Yep.
like, I don't want to do it, and then you get a little bit of success and you're like, maybe I'll keep going a little bit more, and all of a sudden you just kind of have quiet conversation and you spent like an hour working on this puzzle, right?
Yep.
um, and it's another activity that I really quite found very regenerative, and I was like, that was so fun.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a really good way to like be mindful. It almost
Yeah.
feels like and it challenges your senses, right? It does
Yeah.
challenge your senses, like how
And
things fit together.
you're working your brain a new way too. So
Mhm.
there's, this way that we're not used to working or thinking or operating, and it's just because you're not used to it. It just takes a
Mhm.
lot of engagement and kind of a lot of work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really fascinating how much that can help us.
I mean, that's probably principle number 1, right? It's like you just have to break this pattern that you're
Yeah.
in, and not to stress this out. It's like the quiet pattern. You have to do something to like down regulate to break the pattern, and not something that's like to escape per se,
Right.
because we're not talking about like, oh, I'm going to go engage in this behavior because I have to escape my life. It's like, no, no, no. It's like these other things really help balance my life out.
Yeah.
Right. And finding the outlets that are healthy, that help balance so you can come back being restored and fulfilled, because there's
Yeah.
plenty of activities that you go and you escape away, and when you come back you still feel the exact same burnout because you
Yeah.
didn't actually give yourself, quote, the break you needed, you know.
Yeah. 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 So this, I think for a lot of healers, their career feels more like a calling. So there's an aspect
Yeah.
of like, this is the mission, and it can be
Hmm.
very consuming.
Yes.
So there's some wonderful things about that. Like we're very passionate about our work, and I
Hmm.
don't know what time it is now, maybe like 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and we're
Yeah.
excited about what we're talking about and what we're sharing.
Hmm.
Uh, but it can be like an all consuming thing. It's not a normal job. And because we're so interested in it too, we're always working on ways that we can get better, different
Yeah.
things we want to learn, different things that we need to kind of shift or we were talking about AI and how to bring that into the work we're doing to assist things being more smooth and improve.
Mhm. Mhm.
But because of the nature of it, there's just so much passion, and it's such a mission. Like you do need those time periods to just switch gears.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, even with this podcast, right? Like coming up with ideas of like, what are we going to talk about or what's
Yeah,
going on in the world? And those tend to come more natural when we don't feel like this is an obligation. Because
yeah,
at the end of the day, most of the time it doesn't feel that way.
yeah,
I don't think it comes across that way. And all of the topics that we're discussing are, flow much more easily when we have created that. And I don't think we would have been able to enter into this project if we were experiencing a lot of burnout. I think
yeah,
that's probably, I think people pick up podcasting because they're really passionate about something and they want to do it. But the
yeah,
the truth is most people never make it to a 100th episode because for many factors. But I think one to give people credit is they don't continue doing a lot of the things that they would because they are burned out. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? We don't
absolutely.
take that into consideration. We're like, "Oh, people don't have the attention span, they don't have the discipline." I think it's really people can be very overworked and burned out. If they're dealing with a health condition and a challenge, that
Yeah,
puts extra load of stress. If they're just working in too many directions, and if they're not getting the things that we're talking about in this episode, it
yeah,
becomes very easy to not complete your life, whatever that task is in front of you. And that's a very real thing. I don't know if I've ever even kind of quite looked at it that way, but
yeah,
we're exhausted in many ways. We're overstimulated and we're not giving ourselves the pass to just relax and recharge in the way
yeah,
that we actually need to.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just not. It's just the society or a
Mm,
business owner, whatever the culture is. But we live in a very go 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 culture. Like
mhm,
one thing I love doing is going up north. So where I live, it's right on the northern Massachusetts border, and this is where I grew up. We're like 30 minutes from New Hampshire. And my parents moved to Maine. They retired there when I got started in practice, like
mm,
however long ago that was. But I noticed that it's also with Massachusetts, it tends to be like this is closer to Boston. It's just the whole
mm,
kind of area and consciousness is more go, 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 go. And if
mhm.
I go to New Hampshire where there's like the family camp, or if I go visit my parents in Maine and they live in rural Maine, it is a totally different vibe. And like if one day there is like one day of rest there is like 2 days here because it's just like the whole pace of everything is slower.
Yeah,
So you walk into the gas station or whatever, and people aren't tense and like in a rush. Like
yeah.
it's just everybody like chit chat and more lackadaisical and that type of thing. I
Mm.
imagine it's that way for you too when you're going camping. It's
Yeah. Well, and the other fact, we just got our biggest snowstorm like yesterday
Mm,
that we've had this year, and it was about 5 to 7 inches. And I remember last year we got some snow. Maybe we got like 4 snows, right? Enough to be like it snowed this winter. But I
yeah,
think the previous two prior to that, we didn't get like any snow. And I realized last year, once we got a couple snows, how much I liked it because what
yeah,
happened to people is they were forced to slow down. They were
yeah,
forced to be at home a little bit more. They were forced to go into the world with a little more caution and
yeah,
move slower and or maybe not do an activity that they were going to do. And I have come this year into like I'm looking forward to snow because I know it
yeah,
naturally creates this calmness that everyone tries to like create some coziness and they slow down.
yeah,
And it's a very real thing in the Northeast. It's really helpful. And I don't know if anyone's ever been to like a full on snow town, but I always remember it being fascinated. Like I visited a friend in Vermont in February one year, and it was just to go visit him. It wasn't to
yeah,
ski or anything. And when we were there, it snowed like 12 inches right after we got in, and school wasn't canceled. We still went out to a restaurant to have dinner. We
yeah,
still like people just did things because it was like a snow town, and but they did it in a way that was like slower and less
yeah,
fast paced.
yeah,
Um and I feel like that's the way I like to that's like the rhythm that's most effective that helps people really recharge while you're in this intense work of healing because you're around that rat race within people.
yeah,
And a lot of times we get swept away with
yeah,
the uh that intensity that we just carry it into our weekend when we
yeah.
get that when we get the quote downtime.
And it's really interesting that it's like that pace, if you will, I think
Mhm.
creates so much sickness for people. So it's one of the things that both physically, spiritually, emotionally, these different things. So it's
Yeah.
oftentimes it's like that. One of the things we're trying to help people heal with in that role of healer, but it
Yeah.
is so easy to get swept up into that.
It's so I mean, I think that's a great way to like anchor this in is that is part of the root of people's ill health
Yeah,
without a doubt. And I think this is a great time of year to explore this concept because it is the winter. It's a natural opportunity to slow down, go within.
yeah,
And don't pick up the phone every second to, when you do have downtime, because that's kind of hacked us in a negative
Yeah,
way to just always try to be stimulated. Like, oh, there's a
absolutely.
moment. Let's
Yeah.
let's become re-stimulated, even if that means not listening to our podcast for a week. Whatever, it's fine. It's fine if
Yeah.
it's going to restore someone. So, um, I think this is a good one now, because it is a time to like go inside and reflect and be like, what do I need to do to get the most out of myself for the long run? Um,
Absolutely.
they say a lot of New Year's quote resolutions are done by the time this podcast gets released.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it's because we try to add too many things as opposed to create the space um, to recharge, to actually accomplish our goals.
Oh, I love it. One of the things that's a good barometer for me too about like if I'm burnt out or not, or if I'm heading in that direction, is if like my focus with food. So
Mm,
like I like to be able to like make nice meals. Like I like the process. I think we've talked about this about like going to the farm or like picking out the food and
yeah.
that type of thing, and like planning a nice meal. But just like the enjoyment of cooking, like it's just the enjoyment of creating
Mhm.
something, working with the senses. And if I'm like, oh, just whatever is fast, like that.
Mm,
And if I have that going for any length of time, that shows me that like I haven't been giving care to uh
yeah.
like the downtime, which
Mm,
is really just like, or not just necessarily the downtime, but those everyday moments in life.
mhm.
That part of not being burnt out is just enjoying those everyday moments and not rushing
Yeah.
through them because you're trying to get
Yeah.
to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The true way to kind of avoid burnout and to cultivate growth is to really slow down to speed up,
Yeah,
That's kind of the theme of this. So whether you're a person seeking healing, just listening to us for fun, or a healthcare or a healing practitioner, this is always going to be something to visit and check in with yourself with, because it's important for the long run. And like you said, most healers view their work as a calling. So it's like, if I ask you the question, Dr. Sean, like, when do you plan to retire?
yeah.
You Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It's hard for me to imagine not doing it at all. Like I
Yeah.
don't. I don't think I would. I mean, maybe. I don't think that there would be a time where I don't want to be contributing like that in some way.
Yeah.
It's just
Me too.
something that I'd love to share.
Yeah. And I think that's true of most people. So when we look at it that way, it's like, we also, if that's the case, if that's the desire, well, we have to take care of ourselves now, so we can do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So well
So
said.
awesome.
Well, thank
Awesome.
you all for joining us. This was a really fun episode to talk about.
Yeah, this was a good one. I mean, I feel like this is gonna continue to like come to the surface, but it was good to really like look at it, because
Yeah.
it's what a lot of people do struggle with, and they don't know how to talk about it. And sometimes it doesn't even seem all right if you're
Yeah.
like taking care of people, to admit that, like, oh, I'm kind of struggling. I'm worn out. So hopefully, the material that we talked about today will help serve people in really taking a step back, so they can move at a faster pace and have more joy in the healing practice. So we look forward to exploring this topic more with you. If you liked it, share it with somebody who could use it and benefit from it. And please subscribe, rate, and review. And we just look forward to the continued growth, which we have seen every week. So thank you guys. We are grateful for the support that you've given us. And we are excited to continue on this journey of evolving our practice with you.
Thank you all so much, and we can't wait to see you next week.